Welcome, welcome. It's Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving, anyone who cares. Uh, Hope it's a nice one. Even if you don't live in the United States, I guess it's good to be thankful, but at the same time, when we make a holiday of it, I'm pretty sure it like degrades the actual act of being thankful. Like, I did it then. If someone does it then, it really like cuts off a continuous channel of giving a fuck to pretend like a single moment kind of thing. It's kind of like voting. Oh, every 4 years I vote. Check, check, check. All of my input done. Go home. Oh, sure, you think and do things in the process, but then that check really has a lot of like backing, maybe, probably not. Honestly, if you're checking those boxes, you haven't thought it through that much. Sorry, no offense, but that's just the facts of the matter. None of these votes are even legitimate. They're all fucking stolen elections at this point. Anyway, so now I really wanted to had two thoughts. One, I've been talking about how Hawaii was a particle, and that these are like the particles constituents, the main constituents. After that, it's kind of like, whatever. They probably fit in like locations along the way that are pretty much impossible to determine like where this came from. Although maybe with enough other things put together, they could be somewhat. But like that one was even more defined than the vast majority of these, and then at some point they become pretty much just like seamounts, not islands. And so like this is my thought is literally this particle of Hawaii was actually forming generally like here initially in this physical region, and then it maybe even like here, like right here, and then it moved this way by this like opening here of this like energetic propagation in this way, and essentially began, this is what I'm thinking, it began to landslide because there's a mass, like a massive system just kind of hanging out here that began to landslide as the earth started to expand. So like instead of staying bonded over here, it just physically rolled, if you will. So it started as a particle landsliding like a boulder, and just chunks breaking off. But these chunks are like matrix, so it's breaking off the matrix initially is what I'm thinking. Is this is largely matrix, and then at some point it stops breaking off the matrix and instead starts to more directly cause the particle itself to break up. Mind you, it has supernovaed somewhere along the way. Probably like as it started the landslide was due to a like burst of energy that caused it to supernova. Nova, whatever. So like maybe I can find related rocks of this supernova type thing like this. It pretty much was like this, and then regions of it novaed outward, but because of how it functioned, the outward nova actually created this chunk. I believe this is the Himalayas equivalent, even though it's crazy. Like all of these others are just Earth. So if we go around like this, I believe, based on my analysis, to be like the North Pole. It's better if we just look at this. So like South Pole, Antarctica. Here, right here, is South America. With right here, Africa. And then Europe's over here, which Siberian traps are here. Or Eastern India's here. This is all generally India, even though it's like way out of scale. It's just that's how it is in reality. It's that much mass generally around it that it really is like physically a larger mass. Although it does it sideways in a way where we don't detect it as easily. In the same way as we see this chunk upward, so it really just looks like a mountain belt like that kind of thing. So, there's that. That was the first thing I wanted to suggest in here is that this is left behind matrix back here. That was more softer material that it was sliding on. Like it was physically landsliding this way. And as it did, created a ripple around it until it just, I guess, became more laminar flow through it because of just the fact that it was softer and still malleable, like lava, rather than more like solidified materials that probably are just more present near the coastlines than out in the Pacific at the time. So it physically flows out here, and maybe even like right here as it's flowing crosses some specific point of the stream that like creates this structure, because this is related to the streams. I've talked about that in the past. And over here maybe, where there's basically streams crossing, creating eddies. So maybe like here the particle's moving and the stream like overwhelms it in a like crystalline way that produces more of like a whatever this shape is, diamond. And then at some point maybe the matrix stops like coming off of the particle, and it really begins to like make direct contact, so that like the basically a short circuit occurs maybe. It's just generally here, which is generally here. So like at the before this started to widen, it probably was like directly adjacent to this. So it basically probably at that point it had lost enough matrix to have a short circuit to just discharge across a barrier from the earth into the particle to cause it to like break apart. And it then probably because it was still molten and had like open channels that the magma could just flow into once the matrix was removed to here. Like maybe it was more stable with a matrix initially, but it just got too big, and the currents were started to like die down enough where it just slid away, and then left behind a matrix trail. But then it reached a point where it discharged into this eye, basically opening this, like causing the energy necessary to begin to really open this crack. And then at that point, once it started to open, it then got pushed this way where it rolled downhill this way. Initially downhill was this way, but then this, like the eye opened, which basically made downhill then this way. So then it goes this way. And as it does, it rolls along, just losing chunks, like I've mentioned before, that get bigger and bigger until it like breaks off these chunks, breaks off Himalayas, because the Himalayas are protruding kind of like this. And then it just lays on the side, so we're like looking top down on it like this. But really, it was a particle like this that burst outward the mountain chain, I believe, in like a elongated side extension that's like off of the particle in a plane practically. So that like here it is. And then it just kept breaking apart until it had a stable nucleus. And here we are at the stable nucleus. At which point the stable nucleus had currents that were like able to flow out. So it like flowed out here, probably participated in all the seamount stuff, like this whole process in subtle ways that I'm not picking up on right away. Maybe this too. some like half of it, like when it discharges here, it's actually more around here, and then it starts to go like this. Maybe like the the particle itself goes like this, and generally over here, and then over here, and like rests here. I don't know, or just like the subtler energies goes like this. And then like the reason I'm thinking it's the more massive is because like this gets lifted, so like the pieces that are just breaking off that are lighter would resist the uplifting less, so they would more easily be on this side of the boundary, whereas the particle maybe initially resisted it until it basically passed this opening and went up the opening. Then once it's here, it just kind of slides over this way, pretty much, leaving behind some energetic imprint of it, where it's not just like the currents involved, but also there was a physical particle of Hawaii that was involved, that was moving down this way, and then basically got to right here because this just opened between it, and then went this way, while leaving behind like an upper thing that just the current swept over here. So I got these, whatever got like broken off here got swept to a balance point, which was over here. And then this particle itself joined the balance point's location here. Because essentially this is like a divot where the currents could kind of push all the particles to and fill it with the particles. So then it fills it with the particles. So there's that. Then there's this that I wanted to talk about. So I made this map. Obviously, it's still a work in progress. If you've been paying attention to my videos, they've been subtly changing across time, like this was up here. This, I do think, the reason I think this makes sense, just like here, like this generally makes sense with like this boundary, and just like that it was connected to this chunk kind of makes sense to me in my mind. But then like what also makes sense is this chunk over here extending over into this, like this way. So basically like this doesn't stop, it continues, but it just had some current flowing through this region to sever the two parts, but essentially that this continues into the North Pole region. And then at the North Pole are these crossing currents, which kind of align with this thing over here. So down here, let's go back. Down at the very beginning. So essentially here is kind of the beginning, if you will. So this current flows out this way and this way. And then in this direction, it produces this with this like tail to it. So it's got almost like the side with the eddies along it, where ammonites appear to be in a like row actually. So these are probably all ammonites also that I've been drawing in this region. And then so here's like a nucleus, and I drew it up here. Here is the ocean floor location where this was occurring. Over here, it's just Fiji. So it's occurring here, creating this like thing out, extension out this way, and here, this, here. Mind you, all these are volcanoes in this picture here. These are all volcanoes, which is because they're eddies. And then on this side is a bunch of divots that are like little notches that are elongated, like over here, like these notches that just row this side of it to really define the structure. maybe they're here, like these side things here going like this. Kind of look like there might be something going on there. But in short, let's continue. This here generally goes out this way and appears to run into resistance, which is why it generally just kind of hooks off this way. Whereas the other side generally goes out this way, and this one appears to kind of like have different segments. So it has like an outer ring segment, like the matrix, and then the inner chunk, like the particle. But here, the particle seems to, this is my thoughts, is it truly is positioned pretty accurately here, and this current goes across here, right? This one, the wider dark brown segment here cuts across and rejoins this. Where over here it cuts across and joins this, and then here it goes through here, but here it basically widens the segments to just make it more uniform here, so it kind of looks off, but really it's this segment continues over here, this segment continues over here, wherever exactly, and this just widens to appear more like one of these lobes, just like up here, like this. Kind of balanced, not much like turbulence in the comparison, as like it looks more like anywhere else, although just with a shape to it. Okay, then I've replaced the same structure here over here to really show like it wraps around. And this is definitely something we can do if this truly is a case, is that we can take that chunk and just put it there simultaneously, to just because it is there, which is why I drew like this current coming out of here going this way also has an upward flow that meets resistance that generally flows here and wraps around, but then from wrapping around it just wraps right around here, I believe. I might be missing like some aspect of it, given this segment is maybe not the same materials as this segment, although it may just be colored differently and other things of that nature. But yeah. So that kind of concept though, like the fact that it does that, or if it does that, if we find it does that and this can be mapped as a sphere, then it means it was a sphere. It's really that simple. Or whatever shape, maybe it wasn't exactly a sphere, maybe it was more some other shape. Okay, but then this lobe coming out here of this general figure eight side of the figure eight, like this half and this half, I believe it then extends out this way and just continues into here, basically, where at its tip is a mound that had been just kind of pushed into being, I guess, from this current, from this lobe extending. Like it opened a space, and in so doing, it basically took the mass in that space and just concentrated it at the tip here. But it couldn't go further because it was meeting the resistance from essentially this system's current flowing in a figure eight here, just creating a wall, even though ultimately all this is fed by currents from like westward, eastward on this landmass going this way and this way that are then colliding. Ultimately, over time, it begins to create a sphere that has these like characteristics. So, like, this lobe seems to be part of here, which is really promising that this is, in fact, like that. So let's start labeling real quick. Siberian traps. I'll just leave it like that. Maybe make it a little smaller. And a better fonts. That's fine. Maybe with a stroke. Not so big of a stroke. That's fine. Okay. Just something legible. Siberian traps. Right. South America. Africa. African Rift Zone. Antarctica. Essentially, Gurnar would be here. Mantle puncture hole. What else we got? We got North America. Central America. The Himalayas. I don't know what to make of this unit here. I wanna dance with somebody. What else? This being South America because it has that shape. Let's just go over here real quick. Right here. And then Africa. I know it's a little off in terms of the landmass. And then Antarctica. And then the North Pole, which also includes North America here. Himalayas, Philippines, something that I'm not sure about what to equate it to, because it's really elongated, and maybe I just feel like the best thing I can come up with, honestly, is over here, like this. New Zealandia or whatever, and just Fiji. Also, we see this spiral, which has the dual materials that actually go this way and this way in some fashion. So like the actual change in material isn't exactly the same, but it's still yin yang. Here's a galactic arm. Maybe the particle was generally here. Maybe it could be that these are part of the particle as well. That'd be crazy if this fit into... How old is Fiji? Late Eocene. Almost assuredly, then, they are like... This is my thoughts, is there's a vortex going on here. But at the time, the reason this vortex is happening is there's currents in both directions. But not only that, there's an underlayer of the mantle and moho in general that's pushing upward. And there's an overlayer. So basically, it's squeezed into this chamber that's spherical, where it really can't escape. And the overlayer is right here. So it's like physically on top of the particle right here, but with all of the supporting structure of like the entire region that was still unified. So then the particle was there until it came out of that region when the novas started to occur, where it became a ammonite structure. Maybe it even physically wrapped around this way and out here and came through this general way. I feel like it just kind of got pushed out this way, but maybe, I don't know. And like the particle like went this way out and maybe even like right out this way, and it was physically here still at the time, but then it just kept going. Essentially, in doing this, it's moving also simultaneously like this way and this way. And then like when it departs from Fiji, does this like point very directly at Fiji? Pretty close. It pretty much goes right to Fiji. So maybe when it departs from Fiji, it then like takes a different angle here, because at that point then the Earth physically novas. So there's certainly some nova aspects of this particle that is closely tied to Fiji. I haven't really thought it through. I thought I'd more so just mention it to record it, so it's in at least that has happened. Okay. I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. It's almost 11, so I should probably get to interacting with my family and not hiding in here while I do this. But yeah, so there's that. I'll probably label this a bit more, but like, I believe this is valid, 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 this is valid. This makes sense to me, so maybe valid, even though I've never in the past considered it to be something of this nature, where it has a field around it and like all of the features of it like this. It just kind of made sense to me based on a mantle puncture hole putting a current in a direction that, like, if this is Sarastra in general, then it seemingly like did that to Gardnar, maybe. I don't know. I need to unlabel that. Ammonites, India, in maybe Indian Ammonites. So maybe like these spirals are equivalent to these Ammonites over here. This region where there's sort of an Ammonite, like we can, this basically wraps around, generally speaking, and has a nucleus here that generally has like a boundary here that then has another boundary here, and they kind of do that where they have like certain boundaries that then start anew in different ways. But in essence, like this region is a lot like the this. So maybe here would be good at an angle. Deletes. Put it at a 60-degree angle, minus 60-degree angle. Kind of here. They just continue down here. North America, that's specifically, say, like Pole. North Pole. Maybe this is like Greenland. I had not considered that. It would have had to have been here-ish. I guess that, maybe. Greenland. Maybe I'll just put it in like a question mark. Even though all of this is a question mark, so just understand that. Okay, good. People are like, well, then shut the fuck up because you're wrong. Like, you guys are fucking retarded. No offense. Okay, so what am I missing? Maybe I could put Europe in. Let's put Europe. Europe. Also make that one kind of angled. Okay. What do we think this could be? Like generally the Indonesian archipelago. Let's say that for now. Like feasible, maybe. Essentially, whatever this is, if it's the Indonesian archipelago, it would probably be back here too. And I have been kind of doing that. Also, this chunk may almost be like not representing how much space it occupied because it was a like I was mentioning, it was like that particle, like these kinds, particle Himalayas, like that chunk Oahu, just like some chunks sticking out of the main body of the particle that basically occupied the chunks like sticking out segment. So not like all of this, because that was actually protruded outward. So it may be that this is just like a protrusion from a sphere that had like a Himalayas section that then like fell off as a sphere, flattened out generally, and was just next to it. So like this just basically doesn't occupy space on the sphere. It's possible, although I don't know. I'm just spitballing, of course. But I feel like I've made enough progress where that's plausible. Highly likely. Leaning towards highly likely. Okay. So with that in mind, did I say everything? Talked about... I was also, before, I didn't mention this, I generally talk about this, but maybe it formed like on this particle that I keep pointing out here. Maybe what happened was all the currents just kept building a mound here that then got so physically high that it was easily out of balance. Like the top started to wobble on top of it, and then in so doing, it's like the currents pushing against it caused like the wobbling space that opened. Like as it moves, it opens a space as it wobbles, and the current just fills it, and then like the balance starts to wobble it around in like a circle, just like a coin that's just kind of endlessly, you know what I'm saying, like even though you couldn't see the coin, you could probably hear the coin, you know what I'm saying. Okay. So maybe it like moved around a bit until like the currents could move the nucleus over here, but then like Hawaii was emitted. So maybe the particle that was forming actually ended up being the nucleus of Australia, but then a particle was emitted that is still microcosm and like connected energetically to that in terms of they formed as one. But now it's like a offshoot particle over here, so it's not the entirety of the mass like of the particle. It's just some like emitted particle from the supernova that was occurring over and over here. It's pulling energy into this system, causing a vortex, and then emitting parts as it happens, I guess, which then end up being able to be put back together as a sphere because they were. But maybe that sphere like rested on top of a increasingly rising like support structure of like Fiji, generally speaking. And so as it got higher and higher from the currents from the sides pushing into it, really there's really not current, there's just weight above it and below it, pressure below, weight above, so pressure, but it's really not like a current kind of pressure. It's just a sitting there by like its nature by being that much mass. So it's still kind of a pressure, but it's like through a different mechanism of just its sheer weight, which ultimately is probably just like causing a current to flow still, but it's just so massive that the current innately flowing it's like heavy. It's a lot of pressure downward. It pushes downward heavily on the particle, just holding it there, but it's just sitting there. But then the side currents are more like inconsistent, like they have peaks and troughs in the currents like a wave, and they begin to just influence the system more until it maybe uprises to the point of Fiji, and then the particle, it's just from it all is caused to sweep out of here and just become this like landslide that separates into chunks. And then we have Hawaii. So with that in mind, I'll see y'all soon. Happy holidays, I guess. I don't know. I really am like, every year, this is so much energy, guys. Like watching the Macy's Day Parade. Like, didn't we do this the last every year I was alive? Like, is this just for children? If it's just for children, just fucking hit play on the last year's, dudes. If it's for me, don't do it for me at all. Like adults, like I think we have better uses of resources than fucking propagandized parades. Just like, stay in the same mode. You stay in the same mode. We're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. We're doing it again. It just fucking doesn't end, dude. And fucking death. Like, what are we fucking doing? Anyway, regardless of that, happy Thanksgiving.